Yeah, I'm here with Jim
That's what
Ostrowski,
I-
attorney
I
Jim
did.
Ostrowski. He's written a few books from the Buffalo area. We just
A
got
few?
done. A few, yeah.
9.
Shut up! No, we just got done with lunch at what's this place? South Transit Barbecue and Grill.
Yeah, it's good. Even if you're a vegetarian, they have a lot of sides.
Yeah, he's like, you always take me to places with barbecues, and I'm a vegetarian. He says, but we're here talking about masks in schools, homeschooling. A lot of people are upset with the mask thing. I think it's overblown because very few kids have issues with COVID, and the symptomatic there's very few people that even get symptoms. I think it's way overblown. I don't know if you think the same, Jim, but Jim wrote a book here called Why Government Schools Are Bad for Our Kids, and he makes some really good points in this book, especially back in 1900s. I think you said that only 8% of our kids, went to government-controlled schools, which I thought was really interesting because not even 20 years later, we came like one of the most powerful nations in the world from being educated by who? Who educated us?
Mom and dad.
Oh, yeah, but everybody says that. Well,
Homeschool.
they say parents aren't smart to teach your kids.
Well, one of the things I pointed out is, it's been a while, but I think the U.S. passed Great Britain as the #1 economy on earth around like 1880. And at 1880, it really wasn't all that much government school. It started to come in, and some of the states didn't even have it yet, and some of the states was only through like 8th grade or something like that. So it wasn't education that made America the biggest economy on earth. We became the biggest economy, and then we started extending the number of years people went to school. So that's one of those big myths. When I was in New York City in the 80s, I would read the New York Times, and I love the obituaries. These guys who came over with the clothes on their back from Europe and no money to start a business. They got an apple cart and they made a couple of bucks. They bought another apple cart. Next thing you know, they had a storefront, and then the next thing you know, they had like some huge department store on Fifth Avenue. So and then those people sent their kids to college. So we mixed up the whole relationship between being successful economically and education. Getting a little bit off on a tangent, but
no, it just covers the base.
We don't need the government to force us to educate our kids, and it's been an obvious failure, and that's the point I made in the book. The book was a little bit before its time, but now I'm putting out a sequel actually in about 2 weeks. That's going to update the book and then hopefully generate a lot of interest in the original book. Both of them are very cheaply priced. The one's on Amazon, the next one will be on Amazon. But I think a lot of people are really fed up. They're looking at homeschooling, they're looking at pulling their kids out, so it's a good time to revisit the research that I did in government schools are bad for your kids.
Like the last period, during COVID, we did a lot of that homeschooling through online, through the teachers. And a lot of parents pulled out and just did homeschooling through like the Khan Academy, these internet teaching organizations, which was, in my opinion, 10 times more effective. I know parents actually have done that. So I'm just reaching out to people to say, look, don't be afraid to homeschool your kids.
Yeah.
But some people can't because you got 2 people working, and they basically look at the school as like a government-paid daycare system.
Right. Why are 2 people working?
Exactly.
Because the government destroys. I estimate 80% of the wealth you earn, and people say, "Oh no, it's not 80%, Jim." No, I'm not talking just about taxes. I'm talking about regulation, the regulation of the economy, which Dave and I were talking about earlier. What does regulation mean? Regulation is the government's extortion of your property and your liberty, and it reduces the value of your paycheck, because when you go out and buy, looking at a pool company there, you go out and buy a little pool for the backyard for the kids. That's going to be, instead of $100, it's going to be $300 because of regulation. So the government has stolen $200 from you. You don't see it because the costs of regulation they're invisible, frankly. Unlike taxes, you can see the sales tax. But one of the reasons why we have 2 people working, unlike in the 1960s on my street, there was usually just one person working. And certainly when the kids were younger, the mother would stay home, and then they would often get jobs after that. But now it's almost impossible, and that's because the government's destroyed the economy, and it's covered in another book called Progressivism, a primer, which is my bestseller.
So what is, the biggest thing people come back and counter, well, if you don't go to school, the kids aren't going to have no social life. They're not going to learn the ability to socialize. I mean, what's your argument there?
It's not true. I think the way human civilization has unfolded for many, many thousands of years, you got, quote, socialized by being in touch with people who were older than you, and they would teach you stuff, and obviously you would also associate with young people. But to exclusively, there's something really bizarre about, and really artificial and unnatural, to put somebody in a class with 30 kids exactly their own age for 6 hours a day, as opposed to being out and mingling around with a variety of people.
Because you learn.
We devalue older people now, but those people are really cool.
The most
they know
knowledgeable.
A lot of stuff. And, because of Social Security, the grandma often lives in Cleveland or someplace like that, and so there's not that much exposure to the older people who have a lot of wisdom, and you can talk about the history of the family and the history of where you came from and why you're here. So I can just tell you some of the things I learned from people my own age when I was a young kid. I'm taking them to my grave. Okay, so this notion that, if you hang out with all these young kids exactly your age, you're going to get socialized. You're going to get a lot of things, believe me, that you don't, as parents, you don't really want your kids to know or do. So I guess that answers that question.
Yeah, I mean, the big, you made the points in the book. They're the best drug school. Place to get drugs from, drug store. Best place to learn about sex.
The book starts out, I'm a libertarian philosophically, but it's not an ideological book. The first chapter is about crime. The second chapter is about drugs, and the third chapter is about sex. And I'm being very journalistic, and I'm simply saying there's a lot of crime, sex, and drugs in and around government school or around the kids that your kids are socializing with there. And then it goes on from there to talk about health, the drugging of our kids with Ritalin, because boys don't want to sit for 6 hours a day. I hate to tell you that. So there's something wrong with that boy. He doesn't want to sit in a goddamn desk for 6 hours a day. Let's drug him with Ritalin. And then it talks about propaganda, the poor quality of the education. The people teaching your kids are usually members of Democratic teachers unions. I did the research. Even in Clarence, yes, Clarence. I'm going to go to Clarence. I'm going to get away from all that stuff. Guess who's teaching the kids in the Clarence public school system? Members of unions that donate 95% of their money to Democrats. That's where you wonder, your kids come home and have all these ideas. Where do you think they're getting them from? The textbooks are mostly propaganda and nonsense, or they're so watered down to make sure that nobody's offended that there's nothing actually interesting in the book. So with the advent of the internet, Dave and I were talking at lunch, you could spend the rest of your life listening to some really excellent podcasts. There's more reason forever to pull your kids out of these awful places. And the whole MIT curriculum is online for free. There's podcasts. I recommend the Mises Institute for Economic and Political and Historical Podcasts. There's so much free stuff on there. And I talked about it in the book. There's this one woman, I used an example, a woman in Japan, because one of the people I was researching with knew her. And she was able to homeschool, had a divorce. The father was not in the picture. She was able to homeschool 4 or 5 kids, and this was in Japan, but this same logic applies. Even though she was a single mom, had to work, still homeschooled, and all 4 kids went on to get advanced degrees and stuff like that. So it is possible. You can do it. And watch for my new book. I don't want to discuss the title because it's still somewhat under construction, but I'm hoping to get that out in September in time for the new school season.
You want the definition book or no? That's the other one.
Well,
too.
I'm actually putting out a new book next week, and it hasn't even been announced yet.
Really?
Nobody knows about this.
Okay, we'll talk about it another time.
It's a book about language and politics. Watch for it.
It's going to be hilarious.
Dave, I read Dave some of it today. It's hysterical. Let me give you a hint. I've said for years, politics is a battle of the dictionary. So you can maybe guess what this book might be about.
But thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Check out his books.
Thanks a lot. Everything's on Amazon.
Progressivism, why government schools are bad for your kids.
Second Amendment works. The Second Amendment works.
What's the other one you got?
I got 8 of them.
What was the jury one? You have one on jury nullification.
Well, that's an essay on Lent.
Okay, there's an essay.
Political class dismissed. Direct citizen action.
Yeah.
Government schools are bad for your kids. A book about the impeachment of Obama and Hillary for their war crimes in Libya and Syria, which, by the way, there's no statute of limitations on war crimes.
Yeah. So really good information. Doesn't explain more about the fix, but it helps you understand what's really going on in society, why we are evolving this way. You are the best teacher for your children, and don't be afraid of that. Make sacrifices because it will be worth it later on. Thanks for listening.
There's one lesson you can teach your kids. It's more important than anything else. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. Do you think you can teach your kids that? If
Morality.
You can teach them that, that's more than they're learning in government school.
And to refer to something, check out, there's a Kirk Cameron video out there called Matrix of Liberty, and he talks about this monument on Plymouth Rock that's not even taught by our government schools, and it's the foundation of what made America great. And the first main statue, you got faith, then you got morals, then you got education, and it shows the parents doing the education. It shows the whoreheads, the elders doing the education for your children.
I think I've seen that.
So, great video. But thanks for watching, and we'll be back sometime.
Thanks.